The sun beats down mercilessly on the siege lines outside Meereen's walls. Tyrion Lannister sits in the shade of a pavilion, his mismatched eyes studying the harbour below, where 93 warships float at anchor like sleeping dragons on the water. The Meereenese fleet, captured by Daario Naharis and his second sons weeks ago, bobs gently in the afternoon heat. Around him, the Yunkai forces prepare for another day of waiting. Tyrion takes a sip of wine from his cup and considers the irony of his position. A half-year ago he was Hand of the King in the Red Keep. Now he sits outside a foreign city with sellswords and slavers, technically a prisoner of war, yet treated as a valuable guest. The twisted paths of fortune have led him far from Westeros, but perhaps not far enough from the long reach of his sister's hatred. He watches a raven circle overhead and land on the pavilion's edge. The sight reminds him of home, of ravens carrying messages across the Seven Kingdoms. An idea begins to form in his mind, dangerous and audacious in equal measure. The Dragon Queen sits in her pyramid, isolated and surrounded, with her fleet captured and her enemies pressing closer each day. She needs an ally. More importantly, she needs counsel from someone who understands the game as it is played in Westeros. Tyrion calls for parchment and ink. The sellsword captain who brings them eyes him curiously but says nothing. Tyrion has learned that in Essos, as in Westeros, gold buys silence as readily as swords. He dips his quill and begins to write. "Your Grace," the letter opens, "you do not know me, but I know you. I am Tyrion Lannister, son of Tywin, brother to Queen Cersei and Ser Jaime. I am called the Imp by those who wish to wound me, and the Halfman by those who would be kind. I write to you from the siege lines outside your city, where I sit as a captive of the Yunkai masters, watching your fleet rest uselessly in the harbour while your enemies gather like crows to a battlefield." The words flow more easily than he expected. You conquered this city with fire and blood, as is the Targaryen way. But conquest is simple compared to rule. I know this because I have ruled, briefly and poorly, as hand to a mad boy king. I know the weight of making decisions that mean life or death for thousands. I know what it means to be hated for doing what is necessary. Tyrion pauses and looks toward the Great Pyramid, its peak shimmering in the heat like a mirage. Somewhere in those chambers sits a girl of 16 who commands dragons and dreams of the Iron Throne her ancestors built. She is young, perhaps too young for the crown she seeks, but she has something his family lost long ago: dragons and the will to use them. He continues writing. I offer you something your enemies cannot: knowledge of Westeros and those who rule it. I have served in the small council. I know which lords can be bought, which can be trusted, and which must be destroyed. More than that, I know the realm you seek to claim. It is not the kingdom your ancestors conquered, your grace. The dragons are gone, the magic faded, and the people weary from years of war. They need a queen, but not the queen they expect. A commotion from the harbour draws his attention. Smoke is beginning to rise from the nearest ship. At first he thinks it might be a cooking fire, but then he sees figures moving quickly along the docks. The smoke thickens and spreads to a second vessel, then a third. Tyrion sets down his quill and watches as flames begin to lick at the rigging of the captured ships. The fire spreads with unnatural speed, as if someone had doused the vessels with oil before setting them ablaze. The sellswords around him point and shout, but none move to fight the flames. They are too far from the harbour, and the ships were never truly theirs to begin with. The Halfman smiles grimly and returns to his letter. This is not a coincidence. He ordered this himself hours ago with a purse of gold and careful words to the right men. By the time you read this letter, Your Grace, your fleet will be burning in the harbour. Do not think this an act of spite or the work of your enemies. This is a gift, though you may not see it as such. Those ships were an anchor holding you to this pyramid and this city. They were your means of escape when the walls finally fall, your refuge when the choice becomes too hard to bear. The smoke from the harbour has grown thick enough that the Great Pyramid wavers like a vision through the haze. Tyrion can imagine the alarm spreading through the city, the Queen's advisors rushing to bring her word of the disaster. Soon she will be standing on her terrace, watching her naval escape burn to ash on the water. I have taken that choice from you, he writes, because sometimes the greatest mercy is to eliminate false hope. You were never meant to rule from Meereen, Your Grace. You were meant to return to Westeros, to the land your family conquered and lost. The ships were keeping you here, convincing you that compromise and patience were possible. They are not. The masters will never accept what you have done. They will wait and plot and strike when you show weakness, and eventually they will win, because time is on their side. He dips his quill again, his hand steady despite the enormity of what he is proposing. I burn your fleet to force your hand, but I do not leave you defenseless. Word has reached the siege camps that Victarion Greyjoy sails toward Slaver's Bay with the Iron Fleet. The Ironborn seek dragons for their king, but they care nothing for Meereen or its pyramids. Ally with them, claim their ships, and sail for Dragonstone. The island where you were born waits for your return. From the direction of the pyramid, Tyrion can see ravens taking flight, dark specks against the smoke-stained sky. The word is spreading quickly through the city. Soon every soul in Meereen will know that the Dragon Queen's fleet burns in the harbour. You may wonder why I offer this counsel to an enemy of my house. The truth is simple. My house has already fallen. My father is dead by my own hand. My brother is lost to madness, and my sister's bed. And my sister herself rules through a boy king who knows nothing of kingship. The Lannister dynasty dies with this generation, but the Targaryen line can rise again if you have the courage to claim what is yours. Tyrion finishes the letter with a flourish. I am the last of my line, capable of serving a worthy cause, Your Grace. Let me serve yours. Let me help you win the throne that was stolen from your family. Let me help you become the queen Westeros needs. Not the queen Meereen can keep caged in a pyramid. The ships are burning. Your choice is made. Fly west, Dragon Queen, before the ashes cool. He signs it simply, Tyrion of House Lannister, called the Imp. The letter sealed, Tyrion calls for a messenger. A young, yonkish slave appears, eyes wide with fear at the smoke rising from the harbour. Tyrion places the letter in the boy's hands, along with a gold coin. For the Dragon Queen, he says in his passable Valyrian, tell them it explains the fire. As the messenger runs toward the city gates, Tyrion settles back in his chair and pours another cup of wine. The flames in the harbour reach toward the sky like the breath of dragons, and somewhere in the Great Pyramid, a young queen reads words that will change the fate of 2 continents. The Game of Thrones has begun anew, and for the first time since his father's death, Tyrion Lannister believes he has chosen the winning side. The smoke rises black against the azure sky, visible from the highest terrace of the Great Pyramid. Daenerys Targaryen stands at the edge of the balcony, her silver-gold hair catching the afternoon light as she watches her fleet burn in the harbour below. The smell of burning wood and tar carries on the wind, acrid and bitter. Her purple eyes narrow as she counts the vessels consumed by flame, 93 ships reduced to smoke and ash in the span of an hour. A messenger arrived moments ago, breathless and wide-eyed, bearing a letter that explains the catastrophe. The parchment feels heavy in her hands, heavier than such a small thing should be. The words written upon it promise to change everything. "Your Grace," Sir Barristan Selmy says from behind her, his voice careful and measured. The old knight has served her faithfully since she freed him from the fighting pits, but she can hear the concern in his tone. The harbour masters report that the fires started simultaneously on multiple ships. This was no accident. Daenerys does not turn from the balcony. She breaks the seal on the letter and begins to read, her eyes moving quickly across the lines of neat script. "Tyrion Lannister," she says aloud, testing the name. "Son of Tywin, brother to the Queen." The letter is longer than she expected, filled with observations about Westeros that ring true despite coming from an enemy of her house. The writer claims to know which lords can be bought and which must be destroyed, speaks of a realm weary from war and desperate for peace. But it is the final paragraph that makes her hands tremble slightly as she holds the parchment. "He burned my ships," she says, her voice flat. "He burned them to force my hand." Sir Barristan steps closer, his white hair gleaming in the sunlight. "A Lannister trick, Your Grace. They are known for such cruelty." "Is it cruel?" Daenerys asks, finally turning from the harbour to face her most trusted advisor. "Or is it honest?" She reads the letter again, more slowly this time, considering each word. Tyrion Lannister writes that the ships were an anchor, keeping her tied to Meereen when her true destiny lies across the narrow sea. He calls them false hope, a refuge that would always tempt her to compromise when she should be conquering. The young queen walks back into her chambers, the letter still in her hands. The room is vast and cool, decorated with silken hangings and golden ornaments taken from the great masters she overthrew. Maps of Slaver's Bay cover one wall, marked with the positions of her enemies and allies. On another wall hangs a map of Westeros, the 7 kingdoms that belonged to her family for 3 centuries before Robert Baratheon's rebellion took them away. "Summon my advisors," she commands. "All of them." Within the hour, her small council has gathered in the throne room. Sir Barristan stands at her right hand, while Missandei takes her place as translator and scribe. The others, former slaves who now serve as administrators, captains of the Unsullied, representatives from the freedmen, fill the space before the throne. Daenerys does not sit. Instead, she paces before them, the letter from Tyrion Lannister held loosely in her hand. The bronze braziers flicker in the corners, casting dancing shadows on the walls. "My fleet burns in the harbour," she announces. 93 ships, set ablaze by order of Tyrion Lannister of House Lannister, who writes to me from the siege camps outside our walls. She holds up the letter. He offers me alliance and counsel. He offers to help me win the Iron Throne. Murmurs ripple through the assembled advisors. One of the Unsullied captains, a former slave named Grey Worm, steps forward. "Lannister is enemy," he says in his careful common tongue. "Family of the usurper's queen." "Yes," Daenerys agrees, "but he is also the only man in Essos who understands Westeros, as I must learn to understand it." She begins to read from the letter, translating key passages into High Valyrian for those who do not speak the common tongue. He knows which lords can be trusted and which must be destroyed. He knows the realm I seek to claim. Sir Barristan's weathered face is troubled. "Your Grace, this could be a trap. The Lannisters are not known for their honor." "Honor?" Daenerys laughs, but there is no humor in the sound. "Sir Barristan, I have broken chains across Slaver's Bay, but I haven't broken the chains that bind me to this city. Look around you. We sit in a pyramid while my enemies gather outside the walls. We debate and compromise and hope for peace while children starve in the streets because the masters refuse to accept what I have done. She moves to the map of Westeros, tracing the coastline with one finger. Tyrion Lannister writes that I was never meant to rule from Meereen, that I was meant to return to Westeros, to the land my family conquered and lost. He may be right. The room falls silent, except for the crackling of the braziers. Daenerys can feel the weight of their stares, the expectation that she will make the choice that determines the fate of everyone in the room. The ships were my escape, she continues, her voice growing stronger. When the walls finally fell, when the siege became hopeless, I could always flee to those ships and sail away to fight another day. But Tyrion Lannister has taken that choice from me. He forces me to choose between staying and fighting a losing war or leaving for the throne that is mine by right. Missandei speaks for the first time, her young voice clear in the stillness. What will happen to the people if you leave, Your Grace? The freed men you liberated? It is the question Daenerys has been dreading. She looks at the faces around her. Former slaves who found freedom under her rule, soldiers who followed her across 3 cities, advisors who believed in her vision of a world without chains. Leaving them feels like betrayal. I will not abandon you, she says finally. But I cannot protect you by staying here forever, trapped in this pyramid while my true enemies rule from the Iron Throne. The masters will never accept peace. They will wait and strike and wait again until I am weak enough to destroy. The only way to truly free Slaver's Bay is to conquer Westeros and return with a fleet large enough to end slavery forever. She turns to Ser Barristan. How many ships remain in harbour? Ships that were not captured with the Meereenese fleet? The old knight considers. Perhaps 12, Your Grace. Enough to carry your household and the unsullied officers, but not the full army. Then we take what we can and sail for Dragonstone, Daenerys decides. Tyrion Lannister writes that Victarion Greyjoy brings the Iron Fleet to these waters. If that is true, we will have ships enough for the crossing. She hands the letter to Ser Barristan. You will rule in my absence, Ser Barristan, as you did when I disappeared into the Dothraki Sea. Keep the peace as long as you can, protect the freedmen, and wait for my return. The old knight takes the parchment, his expression grave. Your Grace, I swore to protect you. My place is at your side. Your place is where I need you most, Daenerys replies gently. And I need you here, keeping alive what we built together until I can return with dragons and ships to finish what we started. Within hours, the Great Pyramid becomes a whirlwind of activity. Servants pack the Queen's belongings, while unsullied officers select which men will accompany her across the narrow sea. The remaining ships in harbour are loaded with supplies and weapons, their holds crammed with everything needed for the crossing to Westeros. As the sun sets over Meereen, painting the smoke-stained sky in shades of orange and gold, Daenerys stands once more on her terrace. The burned remains of her fleet smoulder in the harbour like funeral pyres, but beyond them she can see the ships that will carry her west. Ser Barristan joins her at the balcony's edge. Are you certain this is the right path, Your Grace? Daenerys nods, her purple eyes reflecting the dying light. Tyrion Lannister was right about one thing, Ser Barristan. The ships were keeping me here, convincing me that compromise was possible. But dragons do not compromise. They conquer. The next morning, As Meereen wakes to find the Great Pyramid empty and their Dragon Queen gone, 12 ships sail west across the narrow sea. From the lead vessel, Daenerys watches the coast of Essos shrink behind them until it disappears into the morning mist. For the first time since conquering Slaver's Bay, she feels truly free. The Raven arrives at the Red Keep as the bells of King's Landing chime the hour of the wolf. Its black wings beat frantically against the dawn sky before landing on the Maester's tower, exhausted from the long flight across the narrow sea. The message it carries will change the course of kingdoms, though the sleepy apprentice who unties the scroll from its leg does not yet know this. Within the hour, Grand Maester Pycelle stands outside the Queen Regent's chambers, his aged hands trembling slightly as he holds the parchment. The news from Essos has travelled quickly through trading ships and merchant vessels, each captain eager to sell information along with their goods. Dragons are moving west, and everyone in the known world will want to know. Cersei Lannister receives the report while breaking her fast, her golden hair still loose from sleep, and her emerald eyes sharp with the wariness that has become her constant companion. The years since her father's death have taught her to expect bad news with every sunrise. But this message makes her blood run cold. "Read it again," she commands, setting down her wine cup with enough force to splash red droplets across the white tablecloth. Pycelle clears his throat and begins once more, his voice quavering. Reports from multiple trading vessels confirm that the Dragon Queen's fleet was burned in Meereen's harbour. Survivors claim the fires started simultaneously across 93 captured warships. The Dragon Queen herself departed the city within hours, sailing west with a small fleet toward unknown destinations. Cersei rises from her chair and paces to the window overlooking the black water. The harbour below bustles with morning activity, fishing boats and merchant vessels going about their peaceful business, unaware that their queen's greatest nightmare may be sailing toward their shores. "Tyrion," she whispers, the name like poison on her tongue. "This has my vile brother's stench all over it." "Your Grace?" Pycelle ventures, confused. "Get out!" Cersei snaps, not turning from the window. "Send word to the small council. We meet within the hour." The old Maester shuffles away, leaving Cersei alone with her fears. She has spent years waiting for news of Daenerys Targaryen's death, hoping disease or assassination would solve the problem of the last Targaryen before it reached Westeros. Now the dragon is coming home, and Tyrion is somehow involved. The small council chamber fills quickly with the realm's highest lords and advisors. Cersei takes her place at the head of the table, her green eyes surveying each face for signs of disloyalty. These are dangerous times, when a queen's own councillors might see advantage in supporting a Targaryen restoration. "I trust you have all heard the reports from Essos," she begins without preamble. "The pretender Daenerys Targaryen has abandoned Meereen and sails west. We must assume she means to press her claim to the Iron Throne." Murmurs ripple through the council. Lord Mace Tyrell, Hand of the King, shifts uncomfortably in his chair. The Master of Ships reports that their naval forces are scattered, some ships stationed at Dragonstone, and others protecting trade routes in the Stepstones. "How many ships does she bring?" asks the Master of Coin. "Unknown," Cersei replies tersely. "But we know she commands dragons, 3 of them if the reports are to be believed." The word dragons hangs in the air like a curse. Every man at the table has heard the stories of Aegon's conquest, of how 3 dragons and a handful of ships conquered 6 of the 7 kingdoms in 2 years. The mathematics of war change entirely when one side commands creatures that can melt castle walls and burn armies. "Perhaps," ventures Lord Mace Tyrell carefully, "we should consider the possibility of negotiation. If she truly is the rightful heir, She is a usurper and a pretender, Cersei cuts him off, her voice sharp as a blade. The rightful king sits the Iron Throne. My son Tommen, second of his name. Her green eyes flash dangerously. Unless you question his legitimacy, Lord Tyrell. Mace Tyrell pales and shakes his head quickly. Of course not, Your Grace. I merely suggest we consider all options. The chamber doors open with a crash, interrupting the tense exchange. Jaime Lannister strides into the room, his golden armor dusty from the road, and his sword hand, the only one remaining, resting on his pommel. His green eyes, so like his sister's, take in the assembled council with a mixture of amusement and exhaustion. Sister, he says, offering a slight bow. I hear we have visitors coming. Cersei feels a flood of relief at the sight of him. Jaime has been gone for weeks, settling the last resistance in the Riverlands, and she has felt his absence keenly. In a world full of enemies and false friends, her twin brother remains the only person she truly trusts. Ser Jaime, she says formally, mindful of the watching councillors. Your report on the Riverlands can wait. We have more pressing concerns. Jaime takes the empty chair beside her, noting the tension in the room. Daenerys Targaryen, I assume. The ravens have been busy this morning. The Dragon Queen sails for Westeros, Cersei explains. Her fleet was mysteriously burned in Meereen, forcing her hand. I suspect our dear brother Tyrion had a role in this convenience. At the mention of Tyrion's name, Jaime's expression darkens. The kinslayer sits somewhere in Essos, beyond the reach of justice, having murdered their father and escaped to join their enemies. The thought of the imp advising a Targaryen pretender makes Jaime's remaining hand clench into a fist. What forces can we muster? He asks. The master of ships spreads out charts of the narrow sea and Blackwater Bay. Our fleet numbers perhaps 60 warships, scattered across 3 ports. If we recall them immediately, we might have 40 vessels ready to defend the capital within a fortnight. Against dragons? Jaime asks skeptically. Ships burn, Lord Admiral. Ask anyone who survived the Battle of the Blackwater. The uncomfortable silence that follows is broken by the arrival of Lady Olenna Tyrell. The Queen of Thorns moves slowly but purposefully, her sharp eyes missing nothing as she takes her place beside her oaf of a son. At 72, she has outlived 3 kings and helped orchestrate the deaths of at least 2 of them. Forgive my lateness, she says sweetly, settling into her chair with the careful movements of great age. I was in the gardens, tending to my roses, when I heard the most interesting news. Dragons, is it? How delightfully nostalgic. Cersei's jaw tightens. She has never liked Olenna Tyrell, finding the old woman's wit too sharp and her loyalties too flexible. The Tyrells supported Renly Baratheon during the War of 5 Kings, switching sides only when it became advantageous. Lady Olenna, Cersei says coldly, perhaps you have wisdom to offer regarding this threat to the realm. Oh, my dear, Olenna replies with a thin smile. I have seen 3 dynasties rise and fall in my lifetime. The Targaryens ruled for 300 years before Robert Baratheon broke their power at the Trident. Now another Targaryen comes to claim the throne. These things are cyclical, like the seasons. Are you suggesting we surrender? Jaime asks, his voice dangerous. I am suggesting we be practical, Olenna answers calmly. The girl has dragons. More importantly, she has the name Targaryen, and a claim that many will consider superior to a bastard boy's. The accusation hangs in the air like a naked blade. Every person in the room knows the truth of Tommen's parentage, though few would dare speak it aloud. Olenna Tyrell's words border on treason, but they are also accurate. King Tommen was born in wedlock to Queen Cersei and King Robert, Mace Tyrell says quickly, trying to repair his mother's dangerous words. His legitimacy is unquestioned. Of course, Olenna agrees mildly, though I wonder how many lords will remember that when dragons fill the sky above their castles. Cersei rises abruptly, her chair scraping against the stone floor. This council is dismissed. We will reconvene tomorrow to discuss defensive preparations. Lord Commander, she adds, looking at Jaime. A word. The councillors file out, leaving the Lannister twins alone in the chamber. Cersei moves to the windows and stares out at the city below, her golden hair catching the morning light. She means to take everything from us, Cersei says quietly. The throne, the crown, Tommen's life, and Tyrion helps her do it. Jaime joins her at the window, his scarred hand resting gently on her shoulder. Then we stop her. We've faced worse odds before. Have we? Cersei asks, turning to face him. When have we faced dragons, Jaime? When have we fought an enemy who can burn our armies from the sky and melt our castle walls? We'll find a way, Jaime promises, though privately he wonders if such confidence is misplaced. We always do. Outside, the ravens continue to arrive, carrying word of the Dragon Queen's departure to every corner of the Seven Kingdoms. In lordly halls and humble cottages, men and women receive the news with hope or fear, depending on their loyalties. The Game of Thrones has begun anew, and everyone must choose a side. In the Red Keep, Cersei Lannister begins planning for war. The Raven arrives at Castle Black in the hour before dawn, its black wings cutting through the grey morning mist that clings to the wall like a shroud. Jon Snow stands atop the great ice barrier, his dark hair whipping in the cold wind as he watches the birds circle the Lord Commander's tower. At 17, he has grown into the role that was thrust upon him, though the weight of command sits heavy on his lean shoulders. Maester Aemon is dead, but his replacement, a younger man named Maester Harmoon, meets Jon in the common hall within the hour. The parchment trembles slightly in the Maester's hands as he reads the message aloud, his voice carrying across the sparse gathering of black brothers who have assembled for the morning meal. Reports from White Harbour confirm that Daenerys Targaryen, called the Dragon Queen, has departed Meereen with a fleet of unknown size, Harmoon announces. Trading vessels report her course set for Westeros. Sources indicate she commands 3 dragons and seeks to reclaim the Iron Throne. The hall falls silent, except for the crackling of the fire in the great hearth. Jon's grey eyes, so like his father's, survey the faces around him. These men have sworn oaths to take no part in the wars of the Seven Kingdoms, to hold no lands, and father no children. But dragons change everything, even ancient vows sworn before heart trees and 7-pointed stars. Lord Commander, says Sir Alliser Thorne, his voice carefully neutral despite the years of animosity between them. What are your orders? Jon considers the question longer than he should. The Night's Watch has maintained its neutrality through 5 kings and a dozen pretenders. They guard the realms of men, not the throne of kings. But the realm Daenerys Targaryen seeks to claim includes the North, and the North remembers what the Boltons did to House Stark. We hold to our oaths, Jon says finally. The Night's Watch takes no part in the wars of the Seven Kingdoms. Our duty is to the Wall and the realms beyond it. Some of the brothers nod approvingly, while others exchange meaningful glances. Jon knows that many of these men came to the Wall from the north, from houses that bled for Robb Stark, and still whisper prayers for the restoration of Winterfell to its rightful rulers. As the brothers disperse to their duties, Jon remains in the hall, staring into the flames. The fire reminds him of stories Sam Tarly used to tell about dragons about how they could melt stone and burn armies. If such creatures truly fly toward Westeros, the Game of Thrones will be played by different rules than any the Seven Kingdoms have known for generations. A commotion in the yard draws his attention. Through the narrow windows, he can see riders approaching the castle, their horses steaming in the cold air. The lead rider carries the crowned stag banner of House Baratheon, but Jon recognizes the man beneath the travel-stained cloak before any herald announces him. Stannis Baratheon dismounts in Castle Black's courtyard with the rigid precision that marks everything he does. At 36, the rightful king, as he styles himself, has aged beyond his years, his dark hair now streaked with grey, and his blue eyes harder than the ice around them. The campaign for Winterfell has not been kind to him, but he carries himself with the same unbending will that has defined his entire life. Jon meets him at the castle's entrance, offering the hospitality due any lord, but not the deference Stannis believes he deserves as king. The two men have developed an uneasy respect during Stannis's time at the Wall, built on shared duty rather than shared affection. "Lord Commander," Stannis says, his voice carrying the authority of a man accustomed to obedience, "I trust you have received word from the south." "I have," Jon replies carefully. "Dragons sail for Westeros." "Another pretender," Stannis says dismissively, though Jon catches the flicker of concern in his eyes. The Targaryen girl thinks her name alone will win her the throne. She will learn otherwise. They walk together into the Lord Commander's solar, a sparse room warmed by a small fire and furnished with the simple necessities of command. Maps of the north cover one wall, marked with the positions of various houses and their probable loyalties. Jon notices Stannis studying these carefully. "The north faces a choice," Stannis continues, settling into the chair across from Jon's desk. "Support the rightful king, or bend the knee to another usurper with dragons." "The Night's Watch takes no part in such choices," Jon reminds him, though the words feel hollow even as he speaks them. "Doesn't it?" Stannis asks, his pale blue eyes fixed on Jon's face. "You are Ned Stark's son, bastard or not. The North knows you, trusts you. A word from the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch would carry weight with lords who remember your father." Jon feels the trap closing around him, as surely as if Stannis had laid steel wire across his path. The king is right. Jon's blood and name give him influence in the north, whether he claims it or not. But using that influence would shatter the neutrality the Night's Watch has maintained for thousands of years. "I am bound by my vows," Jon says firmly. "Vows sworn to protect the realms of men," Stannis counters. "What happens to those realms if dragons burn the north? What happens to your precious wall if Daenerys Targaryen decides the Night's Watch supported her enemies?" The question hangs between them like a blade. Jon has no answer that satisfies both duty and pragmatism. Meanwhile, ravens wing their way south to Winterfell, carrying word of the Dragon Queen's approach to the seat of House Bolton. Roose Bolton receives the news in his solar, reading the message with the same cold calculation he brings to all matters of war and politics. At 35, the Lord of the Dreadfort has learned to hide his thoughts behind an unremarkable face and soft voice. The implications are immediate and troubling. Roose has spent years establishing Bolton rule in the north, carefully managing the delicate balance between fear and acceptance that keeps his enemies at bay. The Stark name still commands love in these lands, but love without power is useless. Now power approaches from across the narrow sea, riding on wings of fire. "Summon the Maester," he commands his steward. "I would send ravens to our allies." Within hours, messages fly from Winterfell to every castle in the north that has declared for House Bolton. The Umbers and Karstarks, the mountain clans that follow, strength above sentiment. The minor houses that chose pragmatism over sentiment when Robb Stark fell. Each receives the same warning. Daenerys Targaryen comes with dragons, and the North must present a united front or burn separately. But not all the ravens carry loyalty to the Dreadfort. In the hidden chambers of castle keeps and the smoky common rooms of village inns, men speak quietly of dragons and Targaryens and the wheel of fortune that may finally turn in their favor. They remember Ned Stark's honor and Robb Stark's valor, and they remember who betrayed them at the Twins, in the halls of the Dreadfort, where the Boltons have ruled for 1,000 years through fear and cunning. Servants speak in whispers of the Dragon Queen, who frees slaves and breaks chains. They wonder if dragons might burn away more than just armies. At Castle Black, Jon Snow stands once again atop the wall as evening falls, watching the lights of the castle twinkle below him like fallen stars. The wind has died to a whisper, and in the strange silence that follows winter storms, he can almost hear the beating of wings that may soon darken northern skies. Samwell Tarly would have loved this, Jon thinks, the return of magic to the world, dragons emerging from legend into terrible reality. But Sam is far away in Old Town, learning to be a Maester, while Jon faces choices that will define not just his own fate, but the future of the Night's Watch itself. A footstep on the ice behind him announces Stannis Baratheon's presence. The king has come to press his case one final time before departing for his campaign against Winterfell. The offer stands. Snow, Stannis says without preamble. Legitimization, lands, a name worthy of your father's memory. Help me secure the North before the dragons arrive, and House Stark can rule from Winterfell again. Under Bolton banners? Jon asks. Under mine, Stannis corrects. I am the rightful king, not Tommen the bastard-born or Daenerys the foreign conqueror. The North needs unity, and unity requires leadership from men the people trust. Jon looks out over the gift, toward lands where his father rode and his brothers played, where the Starks ruled with honor for 8,000 years. He thinks of Arya somewhere beyond the narrow sea, of Sansa hidden in the Vale, of Bran and Rickon lost in the world's vastness. His family is scattered like leaves before a storm, and Winterfell belongs to their enemies. I have sworn my vows, he says again, but the words lack the certainty they carried that morning. Vows can be set aside for the greater good, Stannis insists. Ask any Septon, ask any Maester. The realm needs you, Jon Snow. The North needs you. The conversation ends without resolution, as Jon knew it would. Stannis departs the next morning for his march on Winterfell, leaving behind only the echo of his words and the weight of impossible choices. As winter deepens around Castle Black and dragons fly toward Westeros across the narrow sea, Jon Snow finds himself caught between the oaths that define him and the blood that binds him to lands he may never see again. The wall stands eternal and unchanging, but the world beyond it trembles on the edge of transformation. In the end, he knows, even the Night's Watch will not be able to remain neutral forever. The Eyrie sits like a white jewel against the grey mountain peaks, its towers reaching toward clouds that never quite touch the ancient stones. In the highest chamber of the castle, Elaine Stone stands at a narrow window, watching ravens circle the mountain thermals below. Her auburn hair catches the morning light, and her blue eyes, so like her mother's, reflect a mind that has learned to calculate the value of every gesture, every word, every silence. She is not Elaine Stone, of course. She is Sansa Stark, daughter of Lord Eddard Stark, heir to Winterfell, and key to the North. But in the Vale, Among the mountain lords who bow to House Arryn, she must remain a bastard girl, ward to the Lord Protector who saved her from King's Landing, and the Queen who would see her dead. The raven that arrived before dawn brought news that changes everything. Dragons fly toward Westeros, and with them comes Daenerys Targaryen, the last scion of the dynasty that ruled the Seven Kingdoms for 3 centuries. Sansa has read the message 3 times, each word burning itself into her memory like a brand. Fascinating, isn't it? The voice belongs to Petyr Baelish, Lord Protector of the Vale, who enters the Solar with the quiet grace that marks all his movements. At 33, he remains a small man with sharp features and calculating grey-green eyes, but power has given him a presence that fills any room he enters. His salt and pepper goatee is neatly trimmed, and his dark robes are rich but understated, the garb of a man who prefers influence to ostentation. "My lord," Sansa says, offering a slight curtsy. Even in private, the charade must continue. Elaine Stone shows proper deference to her guardian, even as Sansa Stark measures every word for hidden meaning. Petyr moves to stand beside her at the window, his hands clasped behind his back. "Dragons," he muses, as if the word tastes of honey and poison in equal measure. "I thought them as dead as the children of the forest. Yet here we stand, watching the world change beneath our feet." "What does it mean for the Vale, my lord?" Sansa asks, though she suspects Petyr has been calculating the implications since the moment the raven arrived. "Everything," Petyr replies with a slight smile. "The Vale has remained neutral in the wars that have torn the realm apart. We closed our passes and let the other kingdoms bleed themselves white. But dragons make neutrality problematic." He turns from the window and walks to the great table where maps of the 7 kingdoms lie spread like promises of conquest. His finger traces the mountain passes that guard the Vale's borders, the choke points that have kept foreign armies at bay for generations. "Dragons care nothing for mountain passes," he continues. "They fly over walls that armies cannot breach, burn castles that siege engines cannot crack. The geography that has protected the Vale becomes irrelevant when your enemy rides the sky." Sansa joins him at the table, studying the maps with eyes that have learned to see beyond mere lines on parchment. The Vale sits at the heart of Westeros like a fortress, connected to the north through the Neck, to the Riverlands through the Twins, to the Crownlands through the King's Road. In the right hands, it could be the key that unlocks any kingdom. "You believe she will win," Sansa observes, reading the certainty in Peter's posture. "I believe she has the best chance of any claimant we have seen since Robert took the throne," Peter corrects. "Dragons, the Targaryen name, and the support of those who remember when kings ruled through strength rather than debt and compromise. Yes, I believe she will win." The admission hangs between them like a sword. Sansa has learned to recognize the moments when Peter reveals his true thoughts, and this is one of them. He has already made his calculations, weighed the odds, and chosen his side, or at least chosen not to oppose it. "What of King Tommen?" she asks. "What of the Queen?" Petyr's laugh is soft, but without warmth. A boy king ruled by his mother, defended by a bankrupted crown and a divided realm. Cersei Lannister is many things, but she is not Aegon the Conqueror. She will fall, and when she does, those who supported her will fall with her. The implications settle over Sansa like a winter cloak. If Daenerys Targaryen takes the Iron Throne, the entire political order of Westeros will collapse and reform. New alliances will be needed, new loyalties pledged, new arrangements made between the great houses and their new queen. The Starks supported the Targaryens before Robert's rebellion. Sansa says carefully, testing the waters of this dangerous conversation. Your father served as Robert's friend, not his bannerman, Peter agrees. Ned Stark chose loyalty over dynasty, honor over pragmatism. It cost him his head, but it may yet serve his daughter's interests. Daughter, not daughters. Petter speaks as if Arya is truly dead, as if Sansa is the last of Ned Stark's children. She does not correct him, cannot correct him without revealing knowledge she is not supposed to possess. But the word cuts deeper than any blade. What would you have me do? She asks, falling into the role of dependent ward seeking guidance from her protector. Petter moves to his writing desk, where fresh parchment and ink wait for his commands. We send ravens, he says, taking up a quill, to Dawn, which has cause to hate the Lannisters. To the north, where your name still carries weight. To Highgarden, where the Tyrells will calculate the odds just as we do. And what will these ravens say? That the Vale remembers its friends and honors its debts, Peter replies, beginning to write. That Lord Protector Baelish extends his compliments to the Dragon Queen and hopes for peaceful relations between the Crown and the Mountain Lords, diplomatic language that commits us to nothing while keeping every door open. Sansa watches him work, marveling at how easily he crafts words that say everything and nothing. This is the skill that lifted a minor lord from the fingers to the heights of power in King's Landing. The ability to speak in shadows and make enemies into allies without either side realizing the transformation. You said the Starks supported the Targaryens, she says as he seals the first letter. Does that mean? It means that Elaine Stone, ward of the Vale, has no claim to anything, Peter interrupts gently. But Sansa Stark, daughter of Winterfell, might find that her name opens doors that were closed to her family for 16 years. The suggestion hangs unspoken between them. Reveal herself, claim her birthright, ally with the Dragon Queen, and help restore House Stark to its ancient seat. The idea is intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. The risk, Sansa begins. There is always risk, Peter cuts her off. The question is whether the potential reward justifies the danger. A Stark heir emerging from hiding to support Daenerys Targaryen would send a powerful message to every lord in Westeros. The North remembers, and the North chooses the Dragon Queen over the Lannister usurpers. He finishes the second letter and reaches for a third sheet of parchment. Of course, timing is everything. Reveal yourself too early, and Cersei might move against the Vale before Daenerys arrives. Too late, and you become just another claimant seeking favor from a victorious queen. How much time do we have? Weeks, perhaps a month if the crossing proves difficult, Peter estimates. Long enough to position ourselves correctly, not long enough for our enemies to counter-move effectively. As if summoned by their conversation, Lord Robert Arryn appears in the doorway, his pale face flushed from climbing the tower stairs. At 10 years old, the Lord of the Eyrie remains a sickly child, prone to fits and ruled more by whim than wisdom. But he is still Lord Paramount of the Vale, and his word carries the weight of law among the mountain clans. Cousin Elaine, he says, offering her the sweet smile she has learned to return without effort. Father Peter said there was news from across the narrow sea. Indeed, my lord, Peter says, rising from his desk. Dragons fly toward Westeros. The realm may soon have a new queen. Robert's eyes widen with excitement. Real dragons, like in the stories. Very much like the stories, Peter confirms. Fire-breathing, city-burning dragons ridden by the last heir of House Targaryen. Will they come here? Robert asks, moving to the window where Sansa still stands. Perhaps, Sansa answers, placing a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. "But the Eyrie has never fallen, my lord. Not to armies, not to siege, and certainly not to dragons." The lie comes easily. She has become skilled at telling Robert what he wants to hear. But privately, she wonders if any castle could stand against creatures that breathe fire and cast shadows like storm clouds. The world is changing, and old certainties crumble like autumn leaves. As the afternoon wears on, ravens depart the Eyrie, carrying Peter's carefully crafted messages to every corner of Westeros. Each bird bears words that might tip the balance of kingdoms, promises and threats wrapped in diplomatic courtesy. Sansa watches them fly, these dark harbingers of change, and thinks of her family scattered across the world. Somewhere beyond the narrow sea, Arya learns the arts of death from faceless assassins. In the frozen north, Jon Snow commands the Night's Watch, while winter closes around him like a fist. Bran and Rickon remain lost to the world, if they live at all. But soon, perhaps, there will be a path home. Dragons bring war, but they also bring opportunity for those brave enough to seize it. The Game of Thrones has begun anew, and this time, Sansa means to play to win. The water gardens of Dorne shimmer in the afternoon heat like a mirage made real. Palm trees cast long shadows across the marble pavilions, and the sound of fountains mingles with the distant crash of waves against the Dornish coast. In this place of peace and beauty, Prince Doran Martell sits in his wheeled chair, his gouty legs wrapped in silk, reading a message that promises to change the course of kingdoms. At 53, Doran has learned patience, as other men learn swordplay. His dark eyes, set in a face marked by years of pain and careful thought, move across the parchment with deliberate precision. The grey streaks in his hair catch the sunlight filtering through the orange trees, and his weathered hands hold the letter with the reverence due a holy text. Dragons sail for Westeros. The words burn themselves into his memory like brands on flesh. "Your Grace." The voice belongs to Areo Hota, the prince's faithful captain of guards, whose massive frame casts a shadow across the marble bench where Doran sits. "Summon Maester Caleot," Doran commands quietly, never taking his eyes from the message. "And send word to Princess Arianne. Tell her to come to the water gardens immediately." The Norvoshi giant bows and departs, leaving Doran alone with his thoughts and the sound of fountains that have whispered secrets for 1,000 years. He reads the letter again, savouring each word like wine aged in the deepest cellars of Sunspear. Daenerys Targaryen lives. More than lives. She conquers, she rules, she commands dragons and armies, and the loyalty of the dispossessed, the last daughter of the dynasty that his sister Elia married into, the bloodline for which she died, screaming in the Red Keep, while Tywin Lannister's dogs sacked King's Landing. Doran closes his eyes and remembers. Elia's laughter echoing through the halls of Sunspear, her dark eyes bright with joy as she spoke of her prince, her children, her future as queen. Then came word from King's Landing, terrible word that turned laughter to ash and joy to grief that has never healed. Rhaegar's wife, Rhaegar's children, murdered by Gregor Clegane on Tywin Lannister's orders, while Robert Baratheon claimed the throne and called it justice. "Vengeance," Doran whispers to the empty garden, the word soft as silk and sharp as Dornish steel. Justice. Fire and blood. Maester Caleotti arrives within the hour, his chain of many metals jingling softly as he approaches the prince's chair. The old man's face is grave. He has served House Martell long enough to recognize the look in Doran's eyes, the cold fire that burns when the Prince of Dawn contemplates the destruction of his enemies. "Your Grace summoned me." "Read this," Doran says, handing him the letter. Tell me what you make of it." The Maester's eyes widen as he absorbs the contents. "Dragons, Your Grace, if the reports are true." "They are true," Doran states with certainty. "My sources in the Free Cities have confirmed it. Daenerys Targaryen commands 3 dragons and sails for Dragonstone with a fleet sufficient to her needs." "What would you have me do, Your Grace?" "Send ravens," Doran replies, his voice gaining strength as his plans take shape. "To Old Town, to the Reach, to the Stormlands. Make inquiries about shipping, about grain stores, about the disposition of the various lords toward the current regime in King's Landing. Be subtle. Merchants' letters, trade negotiations, family correspondence. Nothing that would alert the spider's web to our interest." Caliot nods and hurries away to his tower, leaving Doran alone until Princess Arianne arrives, as the sun begins to sink toward the western horizon. His daughter moves with the fluid grace of a water dancer, her dark eyes flashing with curiosity and ambition in equal measure. "Father," she says, settling onto the marble bench beside his chair. "Areo said you had urgent news." Doran hands her the letter without preamble. He watches her face as she reads, sees the moment when understanding dawns and excitement replaces confusion. Arianne has always been quicker than most to grasp the implications of changing circumstances. "Dragons," she breathes, looking up from the parchment. "A Targaryen with dragons sailing for Westeros. Your thoughts?" Arianne stands and begins to pace, her mind racing through possibilities. The Lannisters are finished. They may not know it yet. But dragons change everything. Aegon conquered 6 kingdoms with 3 dragons and a handful of ships. If this Daenerys has even half her ancestors' skill, she will sit the Iron Throne before the year ends, Doran finishes. The question is whether Dorne will support her claim or find itself counted among the enemies of the new dynasty. "Is there truly a choice?" Arianne asks. She is Rhaegar's blood, Elia's good sister. House Martell owes her family a debt. House Martell owes House Targaryen nothing, Doran corrects sternly. We gave them our princess, our blood, our loyalty, and received murder in return. But House Lannister, his voice grows cold as winter wind, House Lannister owes us everything. The conversation is interrupted by the arrival of Princess Myrcella, escorted by her scepter and a handful of guards. The child princess, now 12 years old, has grown beautiful in the Dornish sun, her golden hair gleaming and her green eyes bright with curiosity. She curtsies prettily to Doran and offers Arianne a warm embrace. "Uncle Doran," Myrcella says in her carefully practiced Dornish courtesy, "I hope I find you in good health." "Well enough, child," Doran replies gently. "Walk with me in the gardens. There is something we must discuss." They move slowly through the water gardens, Doran's chair rolling smoothly along the marble paths, while Myrcella walks beside him, her scepter trailing at a discreet distance. The fountains sing their eternal song, and children splash in the pools, their laughter a bright counterpoint to the conversation that will determine a kingdom's fate. "You have been happy here in Dorne?" Doran asks. "Very happy, uncle," Myrcella replies truthfully. "The people are kind, and Prince Trystane has been a perfect gentleman." "Good. That pleases me greatly." Doran pauses beside a fountain carved with dolphins and sea serpents, its spray catching the last rays of sunlight. "Tell me, child, what do you know of dragons?" Myrcella's brow furrows in confusion. "Dragons, uncle? From the stories?" "Not from stories. From reports that arrived today from across the narrow sea. Daenerys Targaryen lives, and she commands 3 dragons. Even now, she sails for Westeros to reclaim her family's throne." The color drains from Myrcella's face as the implications strike her. She is old enough now to understand politics, to grasp what a Targaryen restoration would mean for her family and herself. "What will happen to us?" she asks quietly. "That remains to be seen," Doran answers honestly. "Your mother has been queen for years. Your brother sits the Iron Throne. But thrones change hands, child. The wheel of fortune turns, and those who are high may find themselves low." "And those who are low may rise again?" Myrcella asks, displaying a wisdom beyond her years. "Precisely." Doran reaches out to take her small hand in his weathered one. "You are safe here in Dawn, child. Whatever happens in King's Landing, whatever fate befalls your family, you will be protected. You have my word on that." Myrcella nods, though tears gather in her green eyes. She understands enough to know that protection and freedom are different things, that her value as a hostage may exceed her worth as a person. As night falls over the water gardens, Doran returns to his chambers to begin the work that has waited 16 years. Ravens fly from Sunspear, carrying carefully coded messages to every corner of Dawn, summoning the great houses to consider their ancient grievances and future opportunities. Lord Ironwood receives word at Ironwood, his family's hatred for the Targaryens balanced against their greater hatred for the Lannisters who killed Prince Oberyn. House Dane at Starfall reads carefully crafted suggestions about honor and vengeance, while the Ullars of Hellholt consider the mathematical certainty of Lannister defeat against Targaryen dragons. But the most important message travels north, carried by a raven whose destination is known only to Doran and Maester Caleot. It flies toward the Vale, where another player in the Great Game awaits word of Dawn's intentions. The sun rises in the east. The message reads in code that would mean nothing to casual observers. Dawn remembers its debts and honors its obligations. When fire meets gold, the spear stands ready. In his private solar, surrounded by maps of Westeros and treatises on warfare, Doran Martell allows himself a thin smile. Patience has been his watchword for nearly 2 decades, careful planning his weapon of choice. But patience without action becomes cowardice, and the time for action has finally arrived. The Lannisters destroyed his sister, murdered her children, and thought themselves beyond the reach of Dornish spears. They were wrong. Justice delayed is not justice denied, and House Martell's debts are always paid in full. Outside, the fountains of the water gardens sing their ancient songs, and in their music, those who know how to listen can hear the whisper of approaching dragons and the promise of fire that will cleanse the 7 kingdoms of Lannister gold. The House of Black and White stands silent in the grey dawn, its black stone and white stone walls reflecting the eternal duality that governs all things in Braavos. In the temple's shadowed halls, a girl who is no one kneels before the pool of black water, her brown hair hanging loose around a face that bears the long features of the north. She is 11 years old, though she tries to forget such things, and her grey eyes, so like her father's, reflect depths that would be unsettling in one so young. Arya Stark is dead, the kindly man reminds her daily. Only a girl remains, learning the arts of the many-faced god, practicing the sacred mysteries of giving the gift to those who seek it. But dead girls do not feel their hearts race when ravens arrive from Westeros, and they do not strain to hear whispered conversations about dragons and queens and thrones built from swords. The girl rises from her prayers and moves through the temple with the silent grace the faceless men have taught her. Her feet make no sound on the stone floors as she navigates passages that tourists never see, spaces reserved for those who serve him of many faces. Today, like many days recently, her path takes her past the small chamber where the kindly man meets with visitors who seek the temple's special services. The door stands slightly ajar, and through the gap she can see two men seated across from her teacher. One wears the purple and cloth of gold that marks him as a keykeeper of the Iron Bank. The other, lean and sharp-featured with thinning hair, bears the silver badge that identifies him as Tycho Nestoris, the bank's most skilled negotiator. "The reports are quite clear," Tycho says, in the fluid bravosi that the girl has learned to understand perfectly. "Daenerys Targaryen commands 3 dragons and sails for Westeros with every intention of claiming the Iron Throne." "And the current debts?" asks the keykeeper, his voice carrying the weight of gold and the certainty of ledgers that never lie. "Enormous," Tycho replies with satisfaction. "The Crown owes the Iron Bank near 4 million golden dragons. Cersei Lannister has defaulted on the most recent payments, claiming the royal treasury lacks sufficient funds. Her grandfather Tywin could be trusted to honor his debts. But the daughter—" He shrugs eloquently. The girl edges closer to the door, her training in stealth serving purposes the faceless men never intended. Through the crack, she can see the kindly man nodding thoughtfully as he considers the implications of what his visitors are telling him. "The bank has faced similar situations before," the kindly man observes. "When kings prove unable to pay their debts, other arrangements must be made." "Precisely," Tycho agrees. "The question becomes whether to support a regime that cannot pay, or to invest in one that might prove more financially responsible." The keykeeper leans forward, his purple robes rustling softly. "What do we know of this Targaryen's resources?" "Substantial," Tycho admits. "She conquered 3 cities in Slaver's Bay and freed hundreds of thousands of slaves. The former master's gold and treasure now fills her coffers. More importantly, she commands the loyalty of the freedmen and the unsullied. Armies that fight for belief rather than coin are remarkably cost-effective." The girl's breath catches at the mention of slaves and freedmen. Even here in Braavos, the great refuge of escaped slaves and former bondsmen, the word carries weight. The city was founded by escaped slaves from Valyria, and the Sea Lord's palace still bears the motto, "We light the way to freedom." Her position on slavery aligns with our own values, the keykeeper notes approvingly. The Sea Lord has made it clear that Braavos looks favorably upon those who break chains rather than forge them. "Indeed," Tycho says. "While the current regime in King's Landing tolerates slavers from Lys and Myr, even allowing them to do business in Westerosi ports, the Dragon Queen, by contrast, has made slavery punishable by death in all lands under her rule." The kindly man steeples his fingers, a gesture the girl recognizes as one he makes when weighing the lives of kings and beggars alike. "The many-faced god cares nothing for the politics of mortals," he says carefully. "But the Iron Bank is not the many-faced god, and gold flows where gold will. The bank has already begun recalling certain loans," the keykeeper admits. "Lord Tyrell's debt, for instance, comes due within the fortnight. If he cannot pay, and his current expenditures on the royal wedding suggest he cannot, then his lands and titles become liable for seizure. A wedding that will matter little if the bride and groom lose their heads to dragons," Tycho observes dryly. The conversation continues, but the girl has heard enough to understand the shape of what is coming. The Iron Bank, the largest financial institution in the known world, is abandoning the Lannister regime and positioning itself to support Daenerys Targaryen. When the dragons arrive in Westeros, they will find allies who value profit over sentiment and pragma over propaganda. She slips away from the door and continues through the temple, her mind racing despite her training in emptiness and silence. The kindly man has taught her that the faceless men serve death, not politics. But even death has preferences about which kings live and which queens die. Later, as she tends the candles in the Hall of Faces, the girl finds herself standing before a particular alcove where hundreds of faces hang like masks, waiting for a mummer's play. Some are famous, some forgotten, but all represent lives that the many-faced god has claimed through his servants. She reaches up to touch one face, pale and proud with golden hair. It resembles Queen Cersei Lannister, though the girl knows it belonged to some long-dead Braavosi merchant who shared only the Lannister coloring. Still, the resemblance is enough to make her wonder if this particular face might soon find use. Wondering is for those who still have names, a voice says behind her. The waif approaches silently, her ageless features showing mild disapproval. A girl who is no one does not wonder about queens and kings. A girl was cleaning, she replies carefully, lowering her hand. The faces must be kept properly. The faces know when they are needed, the waif corrects, just as the god knows when debts must be paid. The Iron Bank collects its debts, but the many-faced god collects all debts eventually. That night, as Braavos settles into the darkness that comes before dawn, the girl lies on her narrow cot and thinks about dragons and banks and the strange mathematics of power. Somewhere across the narrow sea, a queen sails toward a throne built from the swords of conquered kings. Here in Braavos, the city of escaped slaves and powerful banks, men in purple robes and silver badges calculate the cost of dynasties and the profit to be found in regime change. The girl thinks of Winterfell, of her father's voice explaining that gold wins wars as surely as swords. She thinks of her mother, dead in a place called the Twins, and wonders if dragon's fire burns hot enough to melt the gold that bought her family's destruction. A girl who is no one should not have such thoughts. But Arya Stark was always stubborn, even in death, and some habits die harder than the girls who hold them. In the morning, she will continue her training, learning new ways to change her face and still her heart. She will serve the many-faced god with the devotion expected of his servants, and she will forget the names of those who wronged her family. But tonight, in the darkness before dawn, she allows herself to hope that dragons burn as hot as they say, and that some debts are paid in fire rather than gold. The Iron Bank always collects its due, the Braavosi say. But winter is coming to Westeros, and with it, the last daughter of House Targaryen bringing 3 dragons and the promise of justice for those who remember when kings kept their word and honor meant more than gold. In the House of Black and White, where death is a gift and faces are currency, a girl who is no one falls asleep with grey eyes, full of northern dreams, and wakes with skills that would terrify the men who killed her family. The many-faced god may be patient, but his servants are thorough, and some gifts are worth crossing an ocean to deliver. Snow falls on King's Landing for the first time in years, dusting the red tiles of the Red Keep with white that gleams like bone in the morning light. The city shivers beneath winter's early embrace, and smoke rises from countless chimneys as the small folk burn whatever they can find for warmth. In the throne room, Queen Regent Cersei Lannister stands before the Iron Throne, her golden hair crowned with frostlight from the high windows, studying reports that promise war and shortage in equal measure. At 34, Cersei has learned that power is a blade that cuts both ways. It protects you from enemies while making you a target for those who would take it for themselves. Today, wrapped in the finest velvets and furs the realm can provide, she feels the weight of that blade more keenly than ever. Dragons approach from across the narrow sea, and winter has arrived early to compound her problems. Your Grace, Grandmaster Pycelle ventures, approaching with the careful steps of a man who has survived 3 kings by knowing when to speak and when to remain silent. The harbour masters report ice forming in the harbour. If it grows much thicker, our supply ships from the Reach may find passage difficult. Cersei turns from the reports scattered across a table brought before the throne, her emerald eyes reflecting both calculation and barely controlled fury. The numbers paint a stark picture. Food stores sufficient for perhaps 2 months at current consumption, with more arriving daily from the Reach, if the weather permits. But dragons care nothing for weather, and the Targaryens have never needed supply lines to bring fire to their enemies. "Double the watch on the walls," she commands. "Triple the patrols in Blackwater Bay. I want every fishing boat and merchant vessel searched for weapons, for spies, for any sign that our enemies send agents ahead of their dragons." King Tommen sits fidgeting on the Iron Throne, his 9-year-old legs swinging freely as he tries to follow the adult conversations swirling around him. The crown sits heavy on his golden curls, and his green eyes, so like his mother's, dart between the assembled lords and advisors with the nervous energy of a child trying to understand why everyone speaks in whispers and worried glances. "Mother," he says during a lull in the proceedings, "why must we have so many soldiers? Sir Pounce doesn't like the sound of their boots in the corridors." The question brings a momentary softness to Cersei's features, though it fades quickly as she remembers the audience watching their exchange. "The soldiers protect us, sweet boy. They ensure that bad people cannot hurt our family." "Like the dragons?" Tommen asks innocently. The throne room falls silent. Even the rustle of silk gowns and the clink of mail seem to pause as every courtier holds their breath. Cersei feels the moment balanced on a knife's edge. How she answers will be repeated in every tavern and brothel in the city by nightfall. "Dragons are just animals," she says firmly, projecting her voice so all can hear. "Dangerous animals, yes, but still animals. Animals can be killed, and those who ride them are merely people. People can be defeated." The assembled lords murmur agreement, though Cersei catches the doubt in their eyes. These men remember the stories their grandfathers told of Aegon's conquest, of dragons that melted castles and burned armies until 6 kingdoms knelt before one. But doubt is a luxury she cannot afford to acknowledge. Queen Margaery enters the throne room with the practiced grace that has made her beloved by the small folk and feared by those who understand the power of popular affection. At 17, she has already buried 2 husbands and stands poised to survive a 3rd if necessary. Her brown hair is arranged in an elaborate style that emphasizes her youth, while her brown eyes miss nothing as they survey the assembled court. "Your Grace," Margaery says, offering Cersei a curtsy that manages to be respectful and subtly mocking at the same time. "I bring word from my grandmother. House Tyrell stands ready to defend the realm against all threats." The words carry weight beyond their surface meaning. Everyone in the room knows that Olenna Tyrell, the Queen of Thorns, has her own thoughts about dragons and queens and the wisdom of backing losing sides. Margaery's statement could be promise or threat, depending on how events unfold. "The Crown is grateful for House Tyrell's loyalty," Cersei replies carefully, each word chosen with the precision of a master archer. "These are dangerous times, and the realm needs its great houses to stand united against foreign invaders." "Indeed," Margaery agrees, "though I confess concern about the reports from the Reach. Our farmers speak of an early frost that has ruined much of the late harvest. With winter arriving ahead of schedule, food stores throughout the kingdom may prove insufficient. The admission lands like a stone in still water, sending ripples of worry through the assembled lords. Food shortages during war mean riots, desertion, and cities that surrender to avoid starvation. Cersei feels another weight added to the burden she carries, another factor in calculations that grow more complex each day. "We shall endure," she states firmly. "The Seven Kingdoms have weathered harder winters and more dangerous enemies." But privately, she wonders if this is true. The realm bleeds from years of civil war. The treasury lies empty, despite the crown's massive debts to the Iron Bank. And now winter arrives early, while dragons fly from the east. Each problem might be manageable alone, but together they form a pattern that speaks of systematic collapse. Lord Mace Tyrell steps forward, his round face flushed with cold and the effort of climbing the throne room's many steps. "Your Grace, if I may suggest, perhaps it would be wise to invite certain lords to court for the winter season. For their protection, of course, given the uncertain times." Cersei studies him carefully, recognizing the suggestion for what it truly is. Summon the lord's children and heirs to King's Landing under the guise of honor and protection, then hold them as hostages against their family's loyalty. It is an old tactic, one her father would have approved, though Tywin would have implemented it with more subtlety. "An excellent proposal," she agrees after a moment's consideration. "Send ravens to Houses Stark." She pauses, remembering that House Stark is dead or scattered, to Houses Arryn, Baratheon, and Martell. Invite them to send representatives to court for the winter season. For their own safety, naturally, given the approaching threats to the realm. The commands flow from the Iron Throne like water from a broken dam. Messages dispatched to every corner of the Seven Kingdoms, calling loyal houses to demonstrate their allegiance through the presence of their children in King's Landing. Ships requisitioned from the royal fleet to patrol Blackwater Bay. Food stores catalogued and rationed, with guards placed over the granaries to prevent both theft and hoarding. As the court disperses to carry out their orders, Cersei remains in the throne room with her son, watching the snow continue to fall beyond the tall windows. The flakes dance in the wind like tiny warriors, beautiful and fragile, and ultimately doomed to melt. "Mother," Tommen says quietly, having waited until the last courtier departed, "are we going to die?" The question strikes her like a physical blow. For a moment, the careful mask slips, and Cersei sees herself through her child's eyes, a woman surrounded by enemies, making desperate plans against impossible odds. But then the mask returns, and she moves to kneel beside the Iron Throne, bringing herself to Tommen's eye level. "No, my love," she says firmly, taking his small hands in hers. "We are lions. Lions do not die easily, and they protect their cubs with their lives. Whatever comes from across the sea, whatever winter brings to our doors, we will face it together, and we will survive." Tommen nods solemnly, trusting her words with the absolute faith that only children can muster. But as Cersei rises and looks out at the snow-covered city, she wonders if lions can fly higher than dragons, if gold is stronger than fire, if a mother's love is enough to protect her children from the wheel of history as it turns toward a new dynasty. Throughout the Red Keep, servants hurry to and fro with purpose, born of fear. Weapons are sharpened, walls inspected for weakness, stores of oil prepared for the defense of the harbor. In the dragon skulls that line the throne room walls, old shadows dance in the torchlight, and those who remember older days swear they see the future written in the empty sockets of long-dead monsters. Winter has come to King's Landing, and with it the promise of dragons and fire and the end of one age giving way to another. In the halls where Targaryens once ruled for 300 years, a Lannister queen prepares to defend a crown that may no longer exist by spring. The Game of Thrones continues, but the rules are changing, and those who fail to adapt will find themselves swept away by forces as inevitable as winter wind, and just as cold. The ancient volcanic island of Dragonstone rises from the grey waters of Blackwater Bay like a sleeping dragon made of stone. Its twisted towers and grotesque gargoyles cast long shadows across the harbour as 12 ships bearing the three-headed dragon banner approach through morning mist. For the first time in 16 years, a Targaryen fleet sails toward the ancestral seat of the Dragon Kings, bringing with it the promise of fire and blood. Standing at the prow of the lead galley, Daenerys Targaryen watches her birthplace grow larger with each stroke of the oars. At 16, she has conquered cities and freed slaves, commanded armies, and tamed dragons. But this moment feels different than any victory she has won. This is coming home to a place she barely remembers, to claim a throne that was stolen before she could walk. Her silver-gold hair whips in the sea wind, and her purple eyes reflect depths that seem older than her years. The crown her ancestors wore for 3 centuries awaits her across these dark waters. But first, she must take it from those who would deny her birthright. Behind her stands Tyrion Lannister, his mismatched eyes studying the fortress with the careful attention of a man who knows that castles can be traps as easily as they can be refugees. At 27, the dwarf has learned to read the intentions of stone and steel, as well as he reads the minds of men. His pale blonde hair catches the morning light as he considers the tactical implications of their landing. "Your Grace," he says quietly, his voice carrying only to her ears above the sound of wind and wave. "We should speak privately once we make landfall. There are things about Westeros you will need to know before we proceed." Daenerys nods without taking her eyes from Dragonstone. The castle grows larger with each moment, its dragon-shaped towers reaching toward the sky like petrified prayers. Somewhere in those halls, she took her first breath. Somewhere in those chambers, her brother Viserys spent his childhood before crossing the narrow sea in exile. Now she returns not as a refugee, but as a conqueror, bringing dragons to reclaim what was always hers. The ships beach on the black sand of Dragonstone's shore with a grinding sound that echoes off the volcanic cliffs. Unsullied soldiers leap into the surf, their bronze spears glinting as they form ranks on the beach. No enemy awaits them. The island has been abandoned since Stannis Baratheon sailed north to claim Winterfell, leaving only a skeleton garrison that fled at the first sight of dragon banners on the horizon. Daenerys steps onto Westerosi soil for the first time since her birth, her boots crunching on volcanic sand that bears the scars of ancient fire. Above her, 3 shadows pass across the sky. Drogon, Rhaegal, and Viserion circle the island like living storm clouds, their wings casting moving darkness across the beach. The sight of them sends fear and wonder in equal measure through the hearts of all who witness their return. Tyrion follows her onto the beach, his shorter legs working hard to match her pace as they climb toward the castle gates. The entrance to Dragonstone yawns before them like a dragon's mouth, its carved stone teeth gleaming in the morning light. Guards in Targaryen livery rush to open the massive doors, and for the first time in nearly 2 decades, a true Targaryen enters the seat of her ancestors. Within the castle's great hall, beneath carved dragons that seem to writhe in the torchlight, Daenerys takes the seat that was hers by right of birth. Tyrion stands beside her, his head barely reaching the armrest of the ancient throne, but his presence carries a weight that has nothing to do with physical stature. "Your Grace," he begins formally, though they are alone save for a handful of trusted guards, "allow me to welcome you home." "Home," Daenerys repeats, tasting the word like wine aged in caves beneath the castle. "I have waited 16 years to say that word and mean it." "Then let us ensure you never have to leave it again," Tyrion replies. "But first, we must discuss strategy. The realm you seek to claim is not the one your ancestors ruled. 300 years of Targaryen rule ended with your father's death, and the kingdoms that rose from its ashes are held together by fear, debt, and the promise of mutual destruction." He produces a scroll from his cloak and spreads it across a carved table that bears the sigil of House Targaryen. The map shows the 7 kingdoms in detail, marked with colored inks that denote allegiances, resources, and military strengths. "Your enemies control King's Landing and the royal fleet," Tyrion continues, his finger tracing the coastlines of Westeros. "But their position is weaker than it appears. The crown owes massive debts to the Iron Bank of Braavos. The harvest has failed across much of the realm, and winter has arrived early to compound their problems." "And our allies?" Daenerys asks, studying the map with the attention she once gave to battle plans in Slaver's Bay. "More numerous than you might expect," Tyrion says with satisfaction. "Dawn remembers what happened to Elia Martell and her children. The North suffers under Bolton rule and dreams of Stark restoration. The Vale remains neutral, but neutrality can become alliance if the price is right." He marks each region with small tokens, creating a visual representation of the political reality they face. "Most importantly, you have something your enemies lack: dragons, a just claim, and the support of those who believe change is not only possible but necessary." A commotion in the courtyard draws their attention. Through the tall windows they can see ravens arriving. Dozens of them, black wings cutting through the grey sky like fragments of night. Messages from across the 7 kingdoms, carried by birds that have flown through storm and wind to reach the returned Dragon Queen. "Word travels quickly," Tyrion observes, as servants rush to collect the messages. "By now, every lord in Westeros knows you have returned. Some will celebrate in private, others will curse your name, but all will have to choose where they stand." The first raven to be brought before the throne carries a message sealed with the sun and spear of House Martell. Daenerys breaks the wax with hands that tremble slightly, not from fear, but from the magnitude of the moment. She reads quickly, her purple eyes widening as she absorbs the contents. "Prince Doran Martell pledges the spears of Dawn to our cause," she announces, her voice carrying a note of triumph. 20,000 men, if we can promise justice for his sister's murder." "Justice you can provide in abundance," Tyrion replies grimly. "Gregor Clegane still lives, though perhaps not for much longer. The Mountain's Head would be a fitting gift for a new ally." More messages follow in rapid succession. Lord Randall Tarley writes from Horn Hill, offering cautious interest in discussions. The minor houses of the Stormlands express curiosity about Targaryen restoration. Even from the Iron Islands comes word that some among the Ironborn remember when dragons ruled the waves, but it is the message from the north that draws the most attention. Written in a careful hand and sealed with the direwolf of House Stark, it bears news that changes everything. Jon Snow, Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, extends greetings to Her Grace Daenerys Targaryen, she reads aloud. He acknowledges her claim to the Iron Throne and requests audience to discuss matters of mutual concern regarding the realm's defense. Tyrion's mismatched eyes widen slightly. The Night's Watch has remained neutral for thousands of years. If Jon Snow is reaching out, it means the situation in the north is more desperate than we realized. Or it means he understands that neutrality becomes complicity when dragons fill the sky, Daenerys suggests. Tell me about this Jon Snow. Ned Stark's bastard, Tyrion explains, his voice carrying a note of respect. I met him briefly at Winterfell years ago. Honor made flesh, if such a thing is possible in this world. If he breaks his neutrality to contact you, it's because he believes the realm faces a greater threat than civil war. As afternoon gives way to evening, the stream of messages continues. Lords great and small, knights and merchants, even septons and maesters send word to Dragonstone. Some pledge support, others seek clarification, but all acknowledge the changed reality that 3 dragons have brought to Westeros. From the highest tower of the castle, Daenerys watches the sun set over Blackwater Bay, while her dragons soar above the waves. Their shadows pass across fishing villages and merchant ships, carrying word of their return to every corner of the known world. For the first time in generations, small folk look up at the sky and see creatures from legend made real. They're beautiful, she murmurs, watching Drogon's black form outlined against the orange sky. And terrible. The best weapons always are, Tyrion agrees from beside her. Your ancestors understood that. Aegon conquered 6 kingdoms not through superior numbers or better tactics, but through the simple fact that dragons make resistance pointless. Fear can be more effective than armies. I don't want to rule through fear alone, Daenerys says firmly. I want to rule through justice, through making the realm better than I found it. Noble goals, Tyrion acknowledges. But first, you must rule. And ruling means making hard choices, accepting unpleasant truths, and sometimes doing terrible things to prevent greater terrors. In the harbour below, more ships arrive hourly, merchants seeking trade agreements, sellswords offering their services, refugees fleeing the chaos spreading across the 7 kingdoms. Dragonstone, long abandoned and empty, suddenly teems with activity as word spreads that the last Targaryen has come home. As night falls and torches are lit throughout the castle, Daenerys sits once more in the throne of her ancestors, while Tyrion reads the day's accumulated correspondence. Ravens continue to arrive even in darkness, their cries echoing off the volcanic walls like the voices of the dead, welcoming the return of their rightful heir. The game begins in earnest now, Tyrion observes, as he sorts messages into piles marked for immediate attention, future consideration, and polite dismissal. Every move we make will be watched, analyzed, and countered by our enemies. Then we must move quickly and decisively, Daenerys replies. Tomorrow, we begin reaching out to our potential allies. We offer them a choice: join us in building a better realm, or face the consequences of supporting a dying dynasty. Outside, dragons cry into the winter wind, and across Blackwater Bay, the lights of King's Landing flicker like dying stars. The wheel of fortune turns, carrying some toward glory and others toward destruction. And on Dragonstone, in the hall where Aegon the Conqueror once planned his great campaign, his descendant prepares to finish what rebellion and civil war have left undone. The restoration has begun. The wind howls across the frozen battlements of Castle Black, like the cries of the dead, carrying with it the scent of snow and the promise of darker days ahead. Jon Snow stands in the Lord Commander's solar, his dark hair dusted with frost from the morning's walk along the wall, reading a letter that has the power to shatter oaths older than memory. At 17, he has grown used to bearing weights that would crush lesser men. But this parchment trembles in his hands like a living thing. The letter bears the three-headed dragon seal of House Targaryen, pressed into red wax that looks like dried blood in the candlelight. The message within is brief, direct, and impossible to ignore. To Jon Snow, Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, greetings. The realm faces a time of great change. Those who would see justice restored and ancient wrongs set right may find common cause with the rightful Queen of the Seven Kingdoms. House Stark has suffered much under Lannister and Bolton rule. Perhaps it is time for winter wolves to run free once more. Daenerys of House Targaryen, first of her name. A knock at the door interrupts his troubled thoughts. Sam Tarly enters, his round face flushed from the cold and his breath coming in short puffs. The young steward has grown more confident in his role since becoming Jon's most trusted advisor, though his eyes still hold the gentle uncertainty that has always marked him. "Lord Commander," Sam says formally, though they are alone. "King Stannis has returned from his march. He requests immediate audience." Jon sets the letter face down on his desk and nods grimly. He has been expecting this conversation, dreading it, since the ravens began arriving from the south with news of dragons and queens and the return of House Targaryen to Westeros. Stannis Baratheon enters the Solar with the rigid bearing that has defined his entire life. At 36, the self-proclaimed rightful king shows the strain of his northern campaign in the grey that streaks his dark hair and the new lines etched around his pale blue eyes. His jaw remains as tight as ever, and his lean frame carries itself with the unbending will that has both served and cursed him throughout his life. "Snow," Stannis says without preamble, his voice carrying the authority of a man accustomed to obedience even when he receives little of it. "I assume you have heard the news from the south." "I have, Your Grace," Jon replies carefully. The title tastes strange on his tongue. Sam and others still call Stannis king, though his claim seems increasingly hollow with each passing day. "Dragons," Stannis says, as if the word itself were a curse. "The Targaryen girl has returned with fire and blood, just as her house words promise. Already, lords throughout the realm abandon their oaths to bend the knee to this foreign pretender." Jon says nothing, though his grey eyes, so like his father's, remain fixed on Stannis's face. The silence stretches between them, filled with unspoken accusations and bitter truths neither man wants to acknowledge. "I know what you're thinking," Stannis continues, beginning to pace the small confines of the Solar. "That my cause is lost, that dragons trump the rightful claim of Stannis Baratheon. You would not be the first to reach such a conclusion." "The Night's Watch takes no part in the wars of the Seven Kingdoms," Jon recites, though the words feel hollow even as he speaks them. "Our duty is to the wall and the realms beyond it." "Pretty words," Stannis replies sharply. "But we both know they're meaningless now. The realm tears itself apart, while the true threats gather in the north, and you mouth ancient formulas as if they were shields against reality." Before Jon can respond, another knock echoes through the chamber. This time, it is Ser Davos Seaworth who enters, his weathered face grave and his manner apologetic. The Onion Knight has served as Stannis's conscience for years, though his counsel has grown less welcome as the king's position has grown more desperate. "Your Grace," Davos says quietly, "riders approach from the south. 3 ravens fly ahead of them, bearing Stark banners." The words hang in the air like an executioner's axe. Stark banners in the north can mean only one thing. The scattered supporters of the fallen house have finally found cause to declare themselves openly. Jon feels something stir in his chest, a warmth he has not felt since word came of his father's death. "How many riders?" Stannis demands. "Perhaps 50, Your Grace. But that's not what matters. The banners they carry." Davos pauses, choosing his words carefully. "They bear the direwolf of Stark, but also personal arms I recognize. Houses Mormont, Glover, and Manderley ride together under the wolf banner." Jon's breath catches in his throat. These are not broken men fleeing Bolton justice. This is a deliberate political statement, a declaration that House Stark still commands loyalty in the north, despite years of Bolton rule. "They come to see you, Lord Commander," Davos continues, his eyes moving from Stannis to Jon. "Word has spread that the Dragon Queen seeks northern allies against those who murdered Lord Eddard. The old loyalties run deep, especially when blood calls to blood. The Night's Watch takes no part." Jon begins again, but Stannis cuts him off with a sharp gesture. "Enough!" the king snaps, his patience finally breaking. "The Night's Watch, the Wall, your precious neutrality. None of it matters if the realm burns while you hide behind ancient oaths. The Targaryen girl offers fire and dragons to any who support her claim. What can I offer? Justice? Honor? The rightful inheritance of kings?" His laugh is bitter as winter wind. "She will win, Snow. Not because her claim is just, but because dragons make justice irrelevant." "Then what would you have me do?" Jon asks, the question torn from him by forces he can no longer resist. "Choose," Stannis replies simply. "Support the rightful king while there is still time to matter, or watch the realm fragment into pieces too small for any one ruler to hold." The conversation is interrupted by commotion in the courtyard below. Through the narrow window, Jon can see the approaching riders crossing the threshold of Castle Black. Their banners snap in the wind. The grey dire wolf of House Stark, prominent among personal arms that tell the story of northern loyalty. Lady Lyanna Mormont rides at their head, though she is barely 10 years old. Behind her come knights and bannermen whose faces Jon recognizes from his childhood at Winterfell, men who served his father faithfully and suffered under Bolton rule. Their presence here is a risk that speaks of desperation, hope, and the enduring power of the Stark name in northern hearts. "Lord Commander," one of the Black brothers calls from the courtyard, "Lady Mormont requests audience. She says she brings messages from houses throughout the north." Jon looks at Stannis, seeing in the king's blue eyes the same recognition he feels himself. The Game of Thrones has come to the Wall whether they welcome it or not, carried by northern lords who remember when honor meant something, and justice was more than a word spoken by the powerful. "We'll receive them together," Jon decides, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. "But I make no promises beyond courtesy." They descend to the great hall, where Lady Lyanna Mormont stands waiting with the casual confidence of someone whose bloodline stretches back to the age of heroes. Despite her youth, she carries herself with the bearing of a true northerner, and her eyes hold depths that speak of wisdom beyond her years. "Lord Commander Snow," she says formally, offering a slight bow that acknowledges his position without surrendering her own dignity. "Your Grace," she adds to Stannis, though the title carries less warmth than duty requires. "Lady Mormont," Jon replies, falling into the formal patterns his father taught him. "You honor Castle Black with your presence." "I bring word from the true lords of the north," Lyanna announces, her young voice carrying clearly through the hall. "House Stark has friends who remember their oaths, who remember justice, and who will not bow to Bolton usurpers or foreign pretenders alike." Her words carry a careful balance, support for House Stark without explicit rejection of either Stannis or Daenerys. It is a political statement worthy of someone 3 times her age, delivered with the conviction of absolute certainty. The North remembers, she continues, using the ancient words of House Stark. We remember Lord Eddard's honour, Lady Catelyn's grace, and the young wolf's courage. We remember the Red Wedding and the oaths broken in blood. Most of all, we remember that winter is coming, and the North must stand united against all threats. Jon feels the weight of expectation settling on his shoulders like a cloak made of iron. Every eye in the hall focuses on him, waiting for a response that will either preserve the Night's Watch's ancient neutrality or shatter it forever in service of higher loyalties. Outside, the wind continues to howl across the wall, carrying whispers of change that even ancient vows cannot silence. In the south, dragons soar over Dragonstone, while queens and kings prepare for war. In Winterfell, Roose Bolton counts his enemies and allies with the cold calculation that has kept him alive through decades of northern politics. But here, in the hall where black brothers have gathered for thousands of years to guard the realms of men, Jon Snow faces a choice that will define not only his own fate, but the future of the ancient order he has sworn to serve. The realm bleeds, winter comes, and somewhere in the deepest parts of his heart, the blood of wolves and kings calls for justice. The great hall of Dragonstone echoes with voices that have not spoken as allies for generations. Representatives from across the 7 kingdoms sit at tables arranged in a great circle, their banners hanging from the volcanic walls like promises of war and change. The sun and spear of dawn hangs beside the falcon and moon of the Vale, while the grey direwolf of House Stark watches over northern lords whose families bled for honour and justice. At the centre of it all sits Daenerys Targaryen, her silver-gold hair braided in the manner of Dothraki queens, and her purple eyes reflecting the firelight that dances across the ancient stones. At 16, she has learned to carry the weight of crowns and the loyalty of armies, but this moment feels different than any victory she has won in Essos. This is not conquest through fire and blood. This is the delicate art of building coalitions from ancient grudges and shared hopes. Beside her stands Tyrion Lannister, his mismatched eyes surveying the assembled lords with the careful attention of a master player studying a board of Sivas. His pale blonde hair gleams in the torchlight as he prepares to speak words that will bind kingdoms together or tear them apart forever. My lords and ladies, Tyrion begins, his voice carrying clearly through the hall despite his small stature. We gather here not as conquered and conqueror, but as allies united by the belief that the realm can be better than we found it. Prince Doran Martell nods from his wheeled chair, his dark eyes bright with satisfaction at seeing his long patience finally rewarded. At 53, he has waited nearly 2 decades for this moment, the chance to strike against those who murdered his sister and her children. His voice carries the weight of years when he speaks. House Martell remembers its debts, he says formally. Justice delayed is not justice denied. The dragons have returned to set right what was wronged. Across the circle, Petter Baelish offers a thin smile that reveals nothing of his thoughts. At 33, the Lord Protector of the Vale has built his power on the ability to choose winning sides, and his presence here speaks louder than any oath of fealty. The Vale has remained neutral through the recent wars, he states carefully. But neutrality becomes impossible when dragons fill the sky. We offer our knights and our mountain strongholds to her grace's cause. Young Lady Lyanna Mormont stands to represent the North, her 10-year-old frame carrying the authority of ancient bloodlines and unquestioned loyalty, Her voice rings with the fierce pride of the northern mountains when she declares the intentions of House Stark's remaining supporters. "The North remembers," she says simply. "House Stark's friends do not forget their oaths, and we do not forgive those who broke guest right at the Twins. Jon Snow may wear black and keep his vows to the Night's Watch, but the rest of us are free to choose. We choose the Dragon Queen." Daenerys rises from her chair, the crown of Aegon the Conqueror gleaming on her brow. The ancient circlet, recovered from Dragonstone's vaults, seems to transform her from a young exile into something timeless and terrible, the last daughter of a dynasty that ruled for 300 years. "Then let us speak plainly of what we face," she declares, her voice carrying the authority of dragons and the promise of fire. King's Landing holds perhaps 30,000 men behind walls that have never fallen. The royal fleet numbers perhaps 40 ships, scattered and undermanned. Against us stand the remaining forces of Houses Lannister and Tyrell, the gold of Casterly Rock, and the desperate cunning of a queen who has nothing left to lose. Tyrion spreads a great map across the table, its surface marked with colored tokens representing the various armies converging on the capital. His finger traces the movements of forces that will determine the fate of kingdoms. "Our advantage lies not in numbers, but in coordination," he explains, falling into the role of war counselor that has made him valuable to queens and kings alike. Prince Doran commands 20,000 spears that can march up the King's Road from the south. Lord Baelish can bring 10,000 knights from the Vale through the mountains. The northern lords offer perhaps 5,000 swords, but their loyalty runs deeper than gold. "And the dragons?" asks Doran, his weathered face showing the first hint of excitement he has displayed in years. "The dragons are our answer to any advantage our enemies might claim," Daenerys replies with quiet confidence. 3 dragons can burn a fleet, melt castle walls, and turn armies into ash on the wind. But I would rather win through justice than terror, through alliance than conquest. Meanwhile, in King's Landing, Queen Regent Cersei Lannister stands on the walls of the Red Keep, watching the harbour where her ships prepare for battle they cannot hope to win. At 34, she has learned that power is a sword that cuts both ways, and now she feels the blade turning in her hands. Her golden hair whips in the wind as she surveys defences that seem pitifully inadequate against the forces arrayed against her. The royal treasury lies empty, the granaries grow sparse, and winter tightens its grip on a city already strained by years of war and misrule. "How many men can we muster?" she asks Lord Mace Tyrell, who stands beside her, with the uncomfortable expression of a man calculating odds he does not like. "Perhaps 25,000 within the city walls," Mace replies unhappily. "The gold cloaks, the remaining Lannister guards, and what forces the loyal houses can provide. But your grace," he hesitates, choosing his words carefully. "Many of the minor houses have sent their regrets. They claim the roads are too dangerous for travel, but they wait to see which way the wind blows," Cersei finishes bitterly. "Fair weather friends who desert at the first sign of storm clouds." The conversation is interrupted by the arrival of Jaime Lannister, his golden hair dulled with road dust, and his green eyes haunted by decisions that tear at the heart of everything he has ever believed. At 34, the Lord Commander of the King's Guard has served kings and queens with unwavering loyalty, but now he faces a choice that will define not only his own fate, but the legacy of his house. "Sister," he says formally, though they are alone save for guards whose loyalty has been bought with gold and fear. "Jaime," Cersei replies, studying his face for signs of the devotion that has sustained her through years of conspiracy and war. "Tell me you bring good news from the Riverlands." The Riverlands are lost, Jaime admits without preamble. House Frey commands only their own lands, and even those grow restless. The minor houses wait to see the outcome of the coming battle before declaring their allegiances. Cersei's emerald eyes flash with anger and something deeper, fear that she cannot quite suppress. And you? What of your allegiances, Lord Commander? The question hangs between them like a naked blade. Jaime has spent his life balancing the competing demands of love and duty, family and honor. But this moment strips away all pretense and forces him to choose between the sister he has loved since childhood and the oath that defines his very existence. I have sworn to protect the king, he says carefully. Tommen is my king and my nephew. That oath stands regardless of what banners fly over the capital. It is not the answer Cersei wanted, but it is the answer she expected. Jaime has always been a knight before he was a lover, a protector before he was a conspirator. Now, with dragons approaching and the realm in flames, he chooses duty over desire. On Dragonstone, the Alliance of Fire takes its final shape as lords and ladies pledge their swords to the Dragon Queen. Maps are studied, supply lines established, and the careful choreography of war planned down to the last detail. Tyrion reviews the messages that pour in from across the Seven Kingdoms, offers of support from unexpected quarters, intelligence about enemy movements, and the gradual recognition that the tide of history has turned decisively against the Lannister regime. The Iron Bank has formally withdrawn its support from the crown. He reports to the assembled lords. Their representative in Braavos sends word that all loans to King's Landing are called in immediately. Without Braavosi gold, Cersei cannot pay her sellswords or resupply her forces. And our own supplies? Daenerys asks, ever mindful of the practical details that determine the outcome of campaigns. Adequate and growing, Tyrion replies with satisfaction. Prince Doran's gold buys grain from the Summer Isles. Lord Baelish's contacts in the Free Cities provide weapons and armor, and the Northern Lords know every secret path between the Neck and King's Landing. As the sun sets over Dragonstone, painting the sky the color of dragon fire, the final preparations begin in earnest. Ravens fly to every corner of the Seven Kingdoms, carrying orders that will reshape the realm. Ships gather in Blackwater Bay, their sails bearing the arms of houses that have chosen restoration over resistance. In the dragon caves beneath the castle, Drogon, Rhaegal, and Viserion rest like sleeping gods of war. Their presence changes the mathematics of every battle, turns every siege into a foregone conclusion, and makes the fall of King's Landing not a question of if, but when. Daenerys stands alone on the highest tower of Dragonstone, watching the lights of her fleet twinkle in the harbor like fallen stars. Tomorrow, she will cross Blackwater Bay and reclaim the throne her ancestors built. Tomorrow, the wheel of fortune will complete another turn, carrying her toward the destiny that has waited 16 years for her return. The dragons sleep, but they dream of fire. The alliance is forged, and the realm holds its breath. In a few hours, when dawn breaks over the narrow sea, the war for the Iron Throne will begin in earnest, and this time, the dragons will win. Dawn breaks over King's Landing in shades of gold and crimson, painting the sky the colors of dragon fire and Lannister blood. From the highest tower of the Red Keep, the great bell of Baelor tolls 13 times, the traditional count that announces the death of kings and the birth of new dynasties. But this morning, the bells ring not for death alone, but for the transformation of the Seven Kingdoms under the shadow of wings that have darkened these skies for generations. 3 days have passed since dragons filled the air above the capital, their roars drowning out the screams of men and the crash of falling stone. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted less than an hour. Drogon's black form descended from the morning sky like a thunderbolt made flesh, his flames turning the royal fleet into floating pyres in Blackwater Bay. Rhaegal and Viserion followed, their bronze and cream wings casting shadows across walls that had stood unconquered for 3 centuries before yielding in minutes to the power of ancient fire. Now, in the throne room, where 20 kings have ruled since Aegon's conquest, Daenerys Targaryen stands before the Iron Throne, while the great lords of Westeros kneel in acknowledgement of her victory. At 16, she carries herself with the poise of someone who has learned that crowns are won through fire and blood, but held through justice and wisdom. Her silver-gold hair is braided with small bells that chime softly as she moves, and the crown of Aegon the Conqueror sits upon her brow with the weight of 3 centuries of history. Her purple eyes survey the assembled lords with the calculating gaze of someone who knows that winning a throne is simpler than keeping it. "Rise," she commands, her voice carrying clearly through the vast hall. You knelt as subjects of a usurper. You rise as citizens of a realm reborn. Among those who stand is Tyrion Lannister, no longer a kinslayer and exile, but Hand of the Queen, his golden pin gleaming on a doublet of Targaryen black and red. At 27, he has found in Daenerys the worthiness his own family never possessed, a ruler who values counsel over flattery, justice over expedience. "Your Grace," he says formally, though a slight smile plays at the corner of his mouth. "The lords await your pleasure regarding the new order." Daenerys nods and takes her seat upon the Iron Throne, the ancient chair of swords that has held the dreams and nightmares of kings for 300 years. The twisted metal seems to welcome her touch, as if recognizing the return of its rightful occupants. "Let us speak first of justice," she declares, her voice echoing off the high vaulted ceiling. "Bring forward those who must answer for their crimes." The great doors of the throne room open to admit a procession that writes the final chapter of the Old Order's failures. Sir Gregor Clegane, called the Mountain, walks in chains between unsullied guards, his massive frame diminished by defeat, but his eyes still holding the sullen defiance that has marked his life of brutality. Behind him comes a smaller figure, broken by betrayal, but not by battle. Cersei Lannister enters with her chin raised, and her emerald eyes fixed on the throne where she once sat as queen. Her golden hair hangs loose around shoulders that tremble slightly, though whether from fear or rage, none can say. "Sir Gregor Clegane," Daenerys pronounces, her voice carrying the finality of dragon fire. "You stand accused of murder, rape, and the slaughter of innocents. The families of Elia Martell and her children demand justice, and justice they shall have." The Mountain says nothing as Prince Doran Martell rises from his wheeled chair, his weathered face showing satisfaction at seeing justice finally served. "Your Grace," he says formally, "Dorne thanks you for this gift. Let it be recorded that the blood debt is paid. Sir Gregor's execution is swift, carried out in the courtyard before the watching eyes of lords who remember when strength alone was enough to escape justice. But this is a new reign, and strength without righteousness is merely brutality wearing a crown." When the guards bring Cersei before the throne, the hall falls silent except for the soft chiming of bells in Daenerys's hair. The former Queen Regent stands straight despite her chains, her beauty unmarred, but her power broken forever. "Cersei of House Lannister," Daenerys begins, but she is interrupted by movement in the crowd of lords. Jaime Lannister steps forward, his golden hair dulled with dust and his green eyes haunted by choices that have torn his soul apart. The Lord Commander of the Kingsguard walks with the measured pace of a man carrying an enormous burden, and when he speaks, his voice carries the weight of prophecy fulfilled. "She is my queen no longer," he says quietly, his words falling into the silence like stones into still water. "And I am tired of serving those who care nothing for the people they rule." Cersei's eyes widen as she recognizes the look on her twin brother's face. Not love, not loyalty, but the cold resolution of someone who has finally chosen duty over desire. "Jaime," she whispers, his name a prayer and a curse on her lips. "I'm sorry," he replies, and his hands close around her throat with the inexorable certainty of fate itself. The prophecy that haunted her dreams for decades finds fulfillment in the gentle touch of someone who once swore to protect her with his life. When it is finished, Jaime removes his white cloak and lets it fall to the stone floor. "I have protected the innocent," he says simply. "My watch is ended." Daenerys watches this final act with the composure of someone who understands that justice sometimes wears the face of mercy, that love can be the cruelest executioner of all. The Valonqar prophecy is fulfilled, the last obstacle to her reign removed by hands that once defended it. "Let it be recorded," she announces, "that Jaime Lannister served the realm truly in the end. He shall be remembered with honor." In the days that follow, the new order takes shape with the precision of a master craftsman building a cathedral. Lords who bent the knee in defeat find themselves elevated or diminished based on their service to the realm rather than their service to particular kings. Prince Doran Martell becomes master of laws, his patient wisdom finally finding the arena it deserves. Peter Baelish retains his position as Lord Protector of the Vale, his talents for manipulation channeled toward constructive ends under the watchful eye of a queen who understands the Game of Thrones better than those who taught it to her. From the north comes word that Jon Snow has been released from his vows by royal decree, free to reclaim his heritage as Jon Stark and rebuild Winterfell in his father's memory. Lady Lyanna Mormont writes that the Northern Lords have acclaimed him as the new Warden of the North, united in their determination to restore honor to lands that have seen too much betrayal. Sansa Stark emerges from her hiding in the Vale to take her place as Jon's heir, her auburn hair and blue eyes marking her unmistakably as Ned Stark's daughter. The reunion of the Stark children provides hope to a realm that has seen too many noble families destroyed by ambition and greed. Even from across the narrow sea comes news that restores balance to the world. Arya Stark, her training with the Faceless Men complete, sends word that she will return to Westeros to serve her family and her queen. The lost wolf of Winterfell has found her pack at last. The coronation takes place on the first day of the new year, when winter's grip begins to loosen and the promise of spring whispers through the city's streets. In the great sept of Baelor, before the watching eyes of thousands, the High Septon places the crown of Aegon the Conqueror upon Daenerys' brow and proclaims her the rightful queen of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men. "Long live the Queen!" the crowd roars, their voices echoing off the crystal dome in a sound like thunder. "Long live Queen Daenerys!" But it is the smaller ceremony that follows which truly marks the transformation of the realm. In the throne room, surrounded by the lords who will help her rule, Daenerys pins the golden badge of hand upon Tyrion's doublet and accepts his oath of service. "I swear by the old gods and the new," he says, his mismatched eyes bright with purpose he has never felt before, "to counsel you truly, to defend the realm against all enemies, and to serve the people with justice and honor." "And I swear to you and to all who hear these words," Daenerys replies, her voice carrying the strength of dragons and the promise of dawn, "that this throne shall never again be a seat of tyranny, that the strong shall protect the weak, and that the wheel that has crushed so many beneath it is broken forever." As winter deepens around King's Landing, the lights in the Red Keep burn brighter than they have in years. The royal treasury, replenished by Dornish gold and Braavosi loans, funds the rebuilding of roads and bridges, the restoration of libraries and schools, the feeding of orphans, and the care of widows. Dragons circle the capital each morning, their presence a reminder that the age of petty kings and endless wars has ended. But they also serve as protectors, guardians of a peace that grows stronger with each passing day. On a clear morning, when the wind carries the promise of spring, Queen Daenerys stands on the balcony where her ancestors once planned the conquest of kingdoms, watching ravens fly toward every corner of the realm. Each bird carries laws that will be remembered for generations: the abolition of slavery in all its forms, the establishment of schools for common children, the protection of the innocent against the whims of the powerful. Tyrion joins her at the railing, his golden badge catching the morning light as he reviews the dispatches that pour in from across the Seven Kingdoms. Reports of peace, of justice, of hope taking root in places that had forgotten what such things looked like. "The realm prospers, Your Grace," he reports with satisfaction. "The northern lords have rebuilt 3 castles burned during the war. Prince Doran has established new courts of justice in Dorne. Even the Iron Islands report decreased raiding and increased trade." "And the people?" Daenerys asks, for in the end it is the small folk who matter most. "They sing songs about the Dragon Queen who broke their chains," Tyrion replies with a smile. "Not the chains of slavery alone, but the chains of despair, of hopelessness, of believing that the world could never be better than they found it." Far away in Winterfell, Jon Stark tends the godswood where his father once prayed, the ancient trees whispering secrets of honor and duty to those who remember how to listen. The North is healing, its wounds bound by the restoration of justice and the return of winter's children to their rightful seats. The wheel of fortune turns, as it always has, carrying some toward glory and others toward shadow. But for the first time in generations, it turns in service of something greater than the ambition of kings. It serves the dream of a realm where justice flows like water and hope burns eternal as dragon fire. That's our theory. Westeros is a land filled with exciting stories and possibilities, and we love exploring them. If you want to accompany us on this journey across the Seven Kingdoms and beyond, then please like,